Today's show is sponsored by Quater. Quater is the new footwear and accessory brand by Travis Matthew. It offers incredible comfort and performance without the gaudy and distracting branding that you'll find on most performance shoes. Quater is committed to making products that fit seamlessly into your everyday style. Products filled with useful technology that can enhance any look while providing unparalleled stability all day long. So check out Quater.com/SBNation to learn more. That's CUATER.com/SBNation.
Hey, what's up, Blazer fans? Tara here with another preview podcast. Today we are getting to know the Chicago Bulls. The Trailblazers are going to see them twice this week. On Monday night, they will be wrapping up their 6-game road trip in Chicago. Then again on Friday, after they are all full of turkey, the Bulls will be coming to the Moda Center. To get to know the Bulls, we have got Maggie Hendricks. She's co-host of the Julie and Maggie Show on 670 The Score in Chicago. Thank you so much for joining me, Maggie.
Thank you for having me. This should be fun.
Well, could you start off by telling us a little bit about what the expectations were for the Bulls going into the season and where they are right now?
Well, the funny thing is the expectations were set by the Bulls management. John Paxson and Garth Foreman, the Bulls VP of everything, and then the Bulls general manager, both brought up the postseason word, both brought up the P word and said, you know, playoffs are what we expect and what we want. And that's where we are. And that's what we want to see out of this team this year. And then season started and they don't remotely look like a playoff team. There's infighting. There's Jim Boylen, the Bulls head coach, is making all kinds of inexplicable decisions. And after Monday's game, he kept talking about needing to develop players. And we were all like, hold up. You have been talking about nothing but how this is the team. They're here. They're ready to go. And now you're developing them again. So the Bulls are basically a mess. So it's a great time for Portland to meet them.
From your mouth to God's ears. You said there's been some infighting and some inexplicable decisions. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Yeah.
So in Friday night's game, Zach Levine is not a great defensive player. There's just really no way around it. And I don't really even know if Zach Levine cares that he's not a great defensive player. It's just not his thing. And early in the game, like I want to say about 3 minutes into the loss to Miami, he was pulled from the game. And when Jim Boylen was asked about it after the game, he said that Zach made 3 egregious defensive errors. And while Jim Boylen wouldn't say what those defensive errors were, Stephen Noe of The Athletic went back through the game and kind of pulled them together. And basically they looked like Zach Levine not caring about defense. Like there was no hustle. There was like maybe one hand up in front of a guy shooting a 3-pointer, but it wasn't great.
So last year, didn't they? Oh wait, no, that might have been Minnesota. Who was going to have that was Minnesota that was going to have the players committee, right?
Oh no, the Bulls were going to have a whole players committee. It was going to be a whole thing because very early in like day 3 of Jim Boylen's tenure after Fred Hoiberg got fired, the Bulls had a terrible loss, but it was away, I believe, at Boston, if I remember correctly. And then they were going to come back and then it was a Saturday night loss. And then they had a game on Monday, and Boylen scheduled a practice, and the players were all like, "Excuse me." And so that's what brought around this whole players committee thing. But I don't think it exists anymore. And like Zach Levine didn't know why he got pulled. What's the point of pulling somebody if you're not going to explain to them why and help them get better at it? And I mean, there's just so much wrong. And no clear map of how they're going to get better.
Is there anyone in the locker room who is acting like a leader for the players? Or who would you say is most likely to, if it was going to pull everybody together?
I think it would most likely be Otto Porter Jr., even though he's fairly new to the team because he just came in with the Bobby Portis trade that happened in February. I think he is the one who's looked at as the respected veteran. And then also Thaddeus Young, who just joined the Bulls this season. However, the problem is like, it's just such a young team. They're just really, really young. And like Otto Porter Jr. is injured right now. So he's spending more time rehabbing than worrying about the team that's on the bench. So there's not a ton of veteran presence. Like last season, Robin Lopez could at least be both comic relief and also, hey guys, let's get our heads together. But this season, there's not as much of that.
Well, so obviously, if they were talking about making the playoffs at the beginning, there was, a lot of hopes, and they must have some strengths. So tell us about what are the strengths of the team right now.
So there are some players that when they play well, you can't take your eyes off of them, and they're so exciting. So like Coby White, even though he's coming off the bench, he was the Bulls' first round draft pick. They picked him 7th coming out of North Carolina. He is just so thrilling to watch when he gets on fire. And like in the game against the Knicks, he had, I believe it was 6 3-pointers in a row. And he's just so fun. And he also, you just want to watch him play basketball because he like literally plays with a smile on his face. He loves playing basketball. So like you want to watch him play basketball, Daniel Gafford too is the other rookie that is just bringing some joy to the court. Lauri Markkanen, when he is on and when he is not trying to be a 3-point shooter and is actually getting into the paint, he can do some great things. Same thing with Zach Levine. Chris Dunn has kind of emerged as the guy who wants to make the rest of his team better, which of course a point guard should always be, but he hasn't quite been that guy yet. So like there are guys who can be super exciting. And the crazy thing is when the Bulls play Portland, they might be a really great team. And everybody's going to be like, but wait, where's that team Maggie was talking about? But that's the thing. They're just so inconsistent. So you might see some really great play, or you may want to like turn off your TV after the first quarter.
Well, so the Blazers have had a lot of different starting lineups this season, trying to figure out how to work in some notable new players as well as just trying to cover for injuries. What's the starting lineup for Chicago? Has it been pretty established the whole season so far?
Yeah, I mean it's been pretty consistent, even with when players like Coby White or Daniel Gafford or Chris Dunn are having a great game. They're all coming off the bench, and so none of them have been moved into the starting lineup. It's been pretty clear around Lauri Markkanen, Zach Levine, Wendell Carter Jr., who is another one that when he gets on fire, he's so much fun to watch. Tomáš Satoranský, and I'm clearly forgetting one because I named 4 guys.
It's early.
Yes. So like that lineup has been pretty steady even as other guys have emerged.
So yeah, tell us a little bit more about some of the players or maybe some storylines that are kind of hot in Chicago that we might not know about right now.
I mean, everything right now is Jim Boylen in over his head? And my answer to that question is yes. There's just a lot of excitement around the rookies. And then, I mean, the underlying issue that it's been the storyline in Chicago for years now is that John Paxson and Gar Forman are completely just like, they have never modernized along with basketball. They have not stayed up with it. So the Bulls haven't ever like tried to revolutionize themselves like say the Golden State Warriors have and tried to keep up with where the game is going. And yet, like John Paxson's, I think, the most tenured GM in the game. So it's like the long storyline in Chicago is, why does John Paxson have a job? And none of us really know the answer to that question.
You started off by talking about Jim Boylen. So would you say he's in the hot seat right now?
I think he should be in the hot seat, but there's such like a reticence to fire people until it is completely the wrong time to fire people by the Bulls. And it's the same ownership that also owns the Chicago White Sox. And like that's just an ongoing thing with Reinsdorf's teams, is that once you're in with them, you are in with them, and you get a lot of rope. You don't, you can make mistakes and things like that, but that also means that you're just not firing people who clearly are not the right people for the job.
So in Portland, the fans, the Blazers have one championship to hang their hats on. Bulls have several more. When it comes to fans and expectations, like, how does that work in a big city with lots of sports teams? Do they hold the front office to the fire? It sounds like maybe there's other teams that people can watch, and so they're not worried about the Bulls right now. Like, how does that work? When we have the Trailblazers, we have the Timbers and the Thorns, pretty much. That's what so that we can focus a lot of attention on just those teams. What's it like in a big city? And are the Bulls just kind of like skating under the radar right now, or like how do they let this happen?
Well, that's interesting because I never really think about it because I've grown up here. So I've just always had a ton of teams to worry about. So it's just interesting to think about that different kind of dynamic. As of right now, everybody's really mad about the Bears being bad because the Bears had high expectations going in. So right now, everybody's noticing and caring about the Bulls stinking, but it's not nearly as much anger and hatred as is headed towards the Chicago Bears. But once the Bears season is over, which is going to be sooner than anybody expected, the anger and hatred will become a lot hotter for the Bulls if they don't get it together. And their other kind of interesting problem with this is they share the United Center with the NHL team, the Chicago Blackhawks, and the Blackhawks have been playing really well, and they weren't expected to play well. Mm-hmm. So like if the Bulls don't do something to make sure they hold on to that spotlight, it's going to go to the Blackhawks really quickly.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I grew up in Portland, so I'm used to only having a very small, so I'm always really curious about in other fan bases, how they distribute their fandom among many professional teams. Okay. One last question about the Bulls. What are you going to be watching for in these games that are coming up with Portland?
I just want to keep seeing Coby White and Daniel Gafford get chances to grow. I have never really bought the idea that they were a playoff team, no matter what the Bulls management told us. So I just kind of want to see the exciting basketball that can happen when these two are allowed on the court.
And is this team, the way they are coached, are you expecting to see, changes in style or approach from game one to game two, or are they pretty much just trying to figure out who they are?
Yeah, they're just trying to figure out who they are, and like they, especially on defense, like they seem to have an idea of what they want to do on offense, but on defense, like they just sometimes are completely lost. And so that, I mean, maybe game two they'll have a little bit better idea of what they're dealing with the Blazers, but I don't think it's going to be that much of a change.
Mm-hmm. Any other stories or players that you want to say anything about before we finish up?
Nobody I can think of. They're like this team is very likable. Like there's a lot of very likable players, and I just really wish they could get it together to figure out how to take that likability and make it into, winning, because that would sure be fun.
Yeah, I can relate to that statement. Well, thank you, Maggie, so much for joining me today. That was fun to learn more about the team. Would you like to tell people how they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at Maggie Hendricks. It's all just together. And you can find me on 670 The Score, the radio station. And during WNBA season, you can find me on The Athletic.
Right on. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.